Welcome to video 3 in the series to help you, a Content Marketing World 2018 speaker, get ready for the big event in September. I'm Tamsen Webster of tamsenwebster.com, and I've been working with CMI on these and the previous episodes. You can find them all on the contentmarketingworld.com blog. Now, in the first episode, we talked about the context for your talk. Who is the audience for? What do they want? What do they value? What do they struggle with? In the second episode, we talked about the key concepts your audience needs to hear in order to be convinced of and agree with your big idea. We talked about finding the audience's goal, the problem of perspective that gets in the way, an idea that makes that problem impossible to ignore, a change in thinking or behavior, and finally, the specific actions they need to take to put it in place. Now, in this episode, we're talking about how to string all of those together, how to create an outline for your talk. And don't worry if you've already started putting slides together. These are compatible processes, because what we're trying to figure out is how do we make sure that the audience gets what they need, not just to understand those big concepts, but to move with you to and through them. Think of those concepts, the goal, the problem, the idea, the change, and the action, as stations on a cross-country train journey. And the things that we're talking about today as the tracks that we're leading them along in order to get them to each of those concepts. So the first station we need to get them to is the goal. And we can either start right in with an opening that cites the goal. So if we're using the example from last time, it could be something like, how can I maximize the return on my digital marketing investment? But you can also do something that helps lead them to the goal. Tell a story, for instance, that illustrates that goal achieved, a success story. You can tell a story that illustrates the problem, so somebody not getting the goal. You can open with some statistics or key questions, things that get people curious enough to keep listening to say, yes, I want to hear the answer to the question the goal represents. Then what you're doing for each of the next is thinking to yourself, what are the concepts that somebody needs to understand and agree with to get to the next step? So between the goal and the problem, for instance, you might want to think about things like, how do you validate the goal? How do you show the audience that the goal is worthwhile? They may not need that, so you may want to move on to what are the barriers that they know exist and what are some of the solutions they've been using to try to overcome those barriers. And by the way, why haven't they been working? Well, that helps you introduce your problem. Once you have your problem and once you've introduced that, then they may want to hear certain concepts like, well, why are you an expert on this problem? What have you discovered as you've been working on it? What are some of the experiences that you've had that led to new discoveries about it? Ultimately, that's all to lead them to this big idea that you've come up with, this incontrovertible truth, this value, belief, or discovery that makes that problem impossible to ignore. And once you've introduced your problem and the idea, you've essentially introduced all the key components of your case before you've told them exactly what you want them to do. You want to check in at this point and make sure that you've answered any objections that they might have. You can also make sure that you are reminding them that they have everything that they need. This sets them up to internally ask that question, so what do I do with all this information? Which is when you introduce your change. Now with the change in the actions, you're taking all of this conceptual stuff and you're making it concrete. So make sure you think through, how can I show all of this working together? Is there a case study that you can talk about? Is there a continuation of the story that you opened with that you can use? Is there an exercise you can take the audience through? Each of those choices is something that you can do to make sure that the change really comes clear to the audience. And then right before you close, remind them of the journey they've been on. Reintroduce the goal, remind them of the problem, tell them about the idea, and wrap it up with talking about that change and everything that it means. When you do that, you can finish by saying, hey, look at that goal that we were walking in with, and look how we not only reached it, but we've reached something even bigger and better. The idea here is just to make sure that any loop that you've opened, you've closed by the end, and that you haven't introduced any information at the end of the talk that you haven't planted the seeds for in the beginning. If you're looking for more information about any of this, you can go back and look at the previous episodes on the contentmarketingworld.com blog, or you can check out my video series at tamsenwebster.com/blog. Either way, I'm really looking forward to seeing your presentations in September.